everybody. Bill Prince here. Welcome to our discussion of Chapter 6 on administrative law. We're just going to spend a brief few minutes talking about this relatively complex topic. And again, I don't expect you to all be experts in administrative law before we are done with this, but I do think it's important in understanding the legal environment of business that we understand exactly what this administrative law business is about. If you think about our country, we have an executive branch, the president, which sort of enforces the laws. We have the legislative branch, which passes laws, and then we have the judicial branch, which interprets the laws. But kind of supporting all of this, particularly the legislative and executive branch, we have what's known as the bureaucracy, and the bureaucracy is made up of a number of governmental agencies, and you always hear about these things. The FEC, the FCC, the SEC, all these kind of alphabet soup organizations, and it is really within these administrative agencies that the business of government is done. We have a very complicated country with lots of complicated issues, and the 435 members in the House and the 100 members in the Senate and the president and the vice president, certainly don't have the time or the expertise to be specialists in all of these different areas. So as time has gone along, we've delegated a lot of duties to administrative agencies in terms of making rules and enforcing rules. And it's that area of law where we talk about how these rules are made and how these rules are enforced that makes up the body of administrative law. Some people call it quasi-government because most administrative agencies, have a head, kind of an executive. They have a legislative branch, the rulemaking branch, and then many of them have courts and enforcement agencies that go along with them. So, because the government deals with many of these complicated issues, Congress has delegated a number of them to these agencies that are under the executive branch but funded by the legislative branch. And again, these agencies are often referred to as the fourth branch of government, or collectively the bureaucracy. There's a couple of different kinds of agencies. There's what are known as executive agencies, and these exist to assist the president or governors, and again, there's agencies at the state and the federal level, in carrying out their executive functions. And then there's what are known as independent regulatory agencies, which are just that. They're independent. They're appointed by the president, confirmed by the Senate, but don't report directly to the president per se, and these things regulate functional areas of our government. So again, the Federal Election Commission, the Federal Communications Commission, the Securities and Exchange Commission, those kinds of things are within the realm of independent regulatory agencies. There are certain limits on these agencies' powers. Many times, and particularly in campaign years, you'll always hear people talk about, these these bureaucracies which regulate all our life, but they're totally unchecked, and we just need to cut down on regulations, and we need to do away with the EPA and the Department of Education, and we've heard all this stuff, but there are in fact some limits on agency powers that kind of check them, and one of those comes from the president, because the president or governors, the heads of the states, appoint the heads to these agencies. So if they don't like what's going on, they are free to fire those folks and get somebody in there who's doing things they agree with. Additionally, generally, whenever there's a change of an administration, we tend to see old people rotate out and new people rotate in. The legislative branch has the ability, through the power of the purse, to provide oversight by simply not funding agencies if those agencies are engaging in behaviors that they don't think are appropriate. And then the judicial branch, again, as they do in all cases, have the ability to review the decisions of these administrative agencies, and if they have gone, beyond their powers, or if they have done something unconstitutional, then the courts have the ability to challenge those behaviors. The main thing that agencies do is they do rulemaking, and administrative rulemaking is sort of similar to legislation in the sense that they are creating rules and regulations that impact how certain things are done. The big difference is it's not being done by elected representatives, but rather by appointed bureaucrats. These rules, which are formulated, have the full force and effect of laws. And so I think of an example of one that almost got through last year, and that had to do with wage and hour, where it looked at exempt and non-exempt employees, and if it changed the categorization for exempt employees, and it lowered their salary, and so it was causing a lot of businesses sort of consternation and headaches in terms of scheduling and overtime and all that sort of thing. And again, that was the result of a law that was or I'm sorry, not a law, but a regulation that was passed by labor. And so the way that these rules occur is that if there's going to be a new rule, then that rule is published in a document called the Federal Register. And so the example I give in the slide is, say that there's going to be a proposed rule to open up national park lands for oil exploration. So that rule has to be filed. And then following that filing and publication, there's a time for public comment and hearings. And during that period of time, groups and individuals have the ability to come before the agency and give the pros and cons of the action, and they do that in the context of hearings. After the hearings are over, then the agency will vote on the rule and either pass it or deny it. And then if it's passed, it becomes a document that basically has the same full force and effect of law as if passed by Congress. But again, that's done by a totally non-representative, non-accountable board. Many of these agencies also have the power to investigate and enforce their rules. So you think of, the EPA can go out and fine people. The FCC can go out and fine people. Those kinds of things. And again, so these agencies have their own investigative force. They also, in many cases, have their own administrative hearing bodies where, the agency basically sort of serves as the judge, the jury, and the executioner. And of course, many people think, well, that's kind of unfair that if I'm being investigated for violation of a law that was made by that agency. The investigators are employees of that agency. The hearing officer is an employee of that agency. I'm getting screwed here. And again, because people have that concern, all decisions of these administrative agencies are subject to review by the courts if they're taken there. So. In any event, in terms of regulation and deregulation, it is as much a political philosophy as it is anything else. And generally we see Republican administrations tend to favor deregulation. It's like, let's get these regulations out of here and let the market take over. Democrats tend to view regulation as being a bit better, arguing that, well, if we didn't have environmental regulations, we'd still be smoggy and species would be going extinct and the water would be dirty and all of that kind of thing. But again, generally speaking, Republican administrations tend to deregulate, Democratic administrations tend to regulate, and I'll leave it at that for you to determine which you think is the most important. So that is a really, really quick discussion of administrative law. Again, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on it in the class, but I did just kind of want to let you know of its existence. So if you have any questions, again, don't hesitate to contact me, and we'll talk to you next time.